The color drained from my fingertips as I watched my sister accept the $10 million check. Her smile was bright as camera flashes in the lawyer's mahogany-paneled office. The leather portfolio in my hands felt suddenly heavy. 37 pages documenting every research breakthrough, every late night I'd spent building what I thought was our family legacy. My parents turned to me with those practiced smiles reserved for awkward family photos. "Time to earn your own, Vivian." The words hit like ice water in my veins. 29 years of being the responsible daughter, the one who stayed close, who built something meaningful, erased with 8 casual words. "My name is Vivian. I'm 29, and I'm a research scientist. This is the story of how I discovered my real inheritance was worth more than money." I managed to keep my expression neutral as conversations resumed around me, but inside my chest felt empty. Vanessa examined her manicure while the lawyer shuffled papers, completely unaware that 3 rows behind her sat a man who would change everything. Harold Brighton, grandfather's personal attorney, hadn't moved from his corner chair. His weathered hands gripped a manila envelope like it contained state secrets. When our eyes met, he gave the slightest nod, the kind that says, "Wait." The primary will reading concluded with handshakes and hollow congratulations. My parents spoke in excited whispers about Vanessa's bright future, while I sat frozen. I was watching 20 years of scientific work reduced to a footnote in someone else's success story. But as the room began to empty, Mr. Brighton's voice cut through the chatter. "There's one additional matter." Every head turned. My mother's smile flickered. My father's fingers drummed the table, his tell for anxiety. Vanessa's eyes narrowed like a cat spotting movement. "Walter Whitman left specific instructions for a secondary reading." He opened the envelope with deliberate care. "This document was to be presented only after the primary distribution." The air shifted. I felt it in my bones, the way the temperature drops before a storm. "To my granddaughter Vivian," he read, his voice carrying more warmth than the sterile legalese moments before. "I leave the Whitman Research Institute, including all laboratory equipment, funding accounts, active research patents, and intellectual property currently filed under Whitman Innovation." The silence that followed felt like holding your breath underwater. Vanessa's check slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor like a wounded bird. "What research institute?" Mr. Brighton continued. "Additionally, the remainder of my estate, stocks, bonds, and retirement accounts totaling approximately $14 million, shall be transferred to Miss Vivian Whitman, effective immediately." My mother gripped the table. My father's mouth opened without sound. Vanessa looked between them like they'd just announced the earth was flat. "This is impossible," my mother finally whispered. "He wouldn't." "He did." Mr. Brighton's voice carried no emotion. "Along with this letter, to be read aloud." My hands shook as he unfolded pages of my grandfather's familiar handwriting. The words that followed would replay in my mind for years. "My dearest Vivian," he began, "if you're hearing this, then my suspicions about your family were correct, and they've revealed their true nature in the most predictable way possible." I felt my father's stare boring into me, but I couldn't look away from the lawyer. "For the past 5 years, I've been systematically documenting their behavior through private investigators and financial audits. I watched them take credit for your innovations. I watched your mother dismiss your achievements at every family dinner. I watched your father redirect conversations whenever you tried to share your work. I watched Vanessa treat you like an inconvenience in your own story." My chest tightened. He'd seen it all. But what they never understood is that I was tracking everything through the patent filing system and family business records. Every patent you developed that mysteriously appeared under family business ventures. Every research grant they claimed credit for. Every brilliant idea of yours that somehow became theirs. Vanessa shot to her feet. This isn't how it was supposed to go." The words hung in the air like a confession. "Supposed to go?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. She looked at our parents, panic flashing across her face. My mother's jaw tightened in warning, but it was too late. "We were told you'd get a small portion," Vanessa continued, her voice rising, "just enough to be comfortable. They said you never cared about money anyway, that you'd be happy with your little experiments. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The family meetings I wasn't invited to, the conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, the way my research proposals always seemed to reach the family board with my name conveniently missing. "How long?" I asked, still sitting, still calm. "How long have you been planning to cut me out?" My father finally found his voice. "Vivian, this isn't personal." "It's entirely personal." The letter rustled as Mr. Brighton continued reading. "They've spent years positioning Vanessa as the heir while systematically excluding you from family business decisions. They've monetized your intellect while questioning your competence. They've built their legacy on your innovations while making you feel grateful for scraps." I stood slowly, my legs steadier than they had any right to be. The irrigation patents, the sustainable farming protocols, the water purification systems. I looked at each of them in turn. "How many of my designs are you currently selling?" Silence. "All of them," Mr. Brighton answered for them, consulting another document. 17 different innovations, generating approximately $2.3 million annually in licensing fees, none crediting the original inventor. My mother's face had gone pale. "We gave you opportunities." "You stole my work," I interrupted, "and for the first time in my life I didn't apologize for raising my voice. And you made me feel crazy for noticing." Vanessa slumped back into her chair, her check forgotten on the floor. "I didn't know about the patents. I swear I didn't know." "But you knew about the will," I said quietly. "You knew they promised you everything while I was building the very innovations that made everything possible." The silence stretched until Mr. Brighton cleared his throat. "There's more." He handed me a set of keys. "The Research Institute has been operational for 18 months. Your grandfather purchased and renovated a 40,000 square foot facility in Research Triangle Park, full laboratory equipment, administrative offices, and housing for visiting researchers. He's been funding it through a trust, waiting for this moment." I stared at the keys, their weight somehow grounding me. He also left instructions for me to inform several major universities and research foundations about your available status should you choose to accept leadership of the Institute. My parents hadn't moved. They sat frozen like actors who'd forgotten their lines. "Vivian," my father started, but I held up my hand. "No." The word came out stronger than I'd ever spoken to him. "For once in my life, you're going to listen." I turned to face them fully. I spent 2 decades believing I was the problem, that I was too intense, too focused, too difficult to love properly. I thought if I just worked harder, contributed more, proved my worth more clearly, maybe you'd finally see me. My voice didn't waver. "But you saw me perfectly. You saw exactly how valuable I was. You just decided I was worth more to you as a resource than as a daughter." My mother's eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. "The Research Institute opens Monday morning," I continued. "I'll be spending the next phase of my life working with people who value collaboration over exploitation, people who understand that innovation requires recognition, not theft." I picked up Vanessa's check from the floor and placed it on the table in front of her. "This belongs to you, but just so we're clear, I never needed your money. I needed your respect, and that was never for sale." Mr. Brighton stood, gathering his papers. "Miss Whitman, your grandfather also left instructions for transitioning the patents back to your name. The legal process will take approximately 6 months to complete, but the preliminary injunctions take effect immediately." I nodded, still looking at my family. They seemed smaller somehow, like someone had adjusted their proportions while I wasn't watching. "Will you reconsider?" my mother asked quietly. "This doesn't have to tear the family apart." I almost laughed. "Mom, the family was torn apart years ago. You just hid it well." I walked toward the door, then turned back. "But here's what's going to happen. Every patent, every innovation, every brilliant solution you've been selling, the licensing agreements are terminated as of today, and they won't be renewed." My father's eyes widened. "You can't." "I can, and I will." I smiled for the first time that day. Because unlike you, I actually built something real, and real things have real consequences. The last thing I heard as the door closed behind me was Vanessa's voice, small and broken. We were supposed to be a team, but we never were. We were just a business model where I provided the product and they collected the profit. The only difference now was that I finally understood the transaction. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of my new workplace. The research institute was more beautiful than I'd imagined. Glass walls, open laboratories, collaborative spaces designed for the kind of work I'd dreamed of since graduate school. My name was already on the building directory. Dr. Vivian Whitman, Director of Innovation. That first week, I hired 12 researchers. By month 3, we had our first breakthrough in carbon sequestration. By year 1, we developed water purification systems that were being installed in rural communities across 3 continents. But the moment I knew everything had truly changed came 18 months later. I was preparing for a major presentation at an environmental science conference in Denver when my assistant mentioned that 2 attendees had specifically requested information about attending my session. At the Denver Convention Center, I was presenting our latest findings when I spotted familiar faces in the audience. My parents, sitting in the back row, looking older and smaller than I remembered. After my presentation, they approached the stage. "We're proud of you," my mother said, and for the first time, she sounded like she meant it. "We made mistakes," my father added, "serious ones, but seeing what you've built." "I know," I interrupted gently, "and I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We lost you, didn't we?" "No," I said, looking around at the conference hall full of scientists and researchers who valued my work, who collaborated instead of competing, who built each other up instead of tearing each other down. "You lost the version of me that needed your approval to exist, but you never really had me to begin with." They left that afternoon. We exchanged polite holiday cards for the next 2 years, but we never spoke in person again. The family business struggled without the patent income and eventually downsized significantly. My parents sold their large family home and moved to a smaller place in Florida, living comfortably but quietly on their remaining savings. Vanessa was different. She started showing up at the Institute about 6 months after the will reading, not asking for anything, just watching. Eventually, she began volunteering in our community outreach programs, helping explain complex scientific concepts to local school groups. "I don't expect forgiveness," she told me one afternoon as we watched kids examine water samples under microscopes. "I just want to understand what real contribution feels like." The legal complications from the patent transfers took 8 months to fully resolve. Vanessa never received her $10 million check. The estate funds were tied up during the patent disputes, and by the time everything was settled, most of the money had gone to legal fees and back payments to me for the stolen intellectual property. She found work as a science communicator for a nonprofit, using her presentation skills to make research accessible to public audiences. 3 years after that day in the lawyer's office, she approached me after one of her educational presentations. "I'm not trying to earn my way back into your life," she said during one of our rare conversations. "I'm trying to learn how to earn my way into my own." We never became close sisters, but we developed a respectful working relationship. She continued her science education work, and I occasionally provided her organization with research insights for their programs. It wasn't the family reconciliation some people expected, but it was honest, and that was enough. 5 years later, I stood in my laboratory surrounded by innovations that bore my name, funded by investors who valued my vision, supported by researchers who saw me as a mentor rather than a means to an end. My grandfather's letter, framed on my office wall, ended with words I read every morning. "Legacy isn't what you inherit, Vivian. It's what you build when no one believes you can." And for the first time in my life, I had built something that was entirely, authentically, irreplaceably mine. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you, All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.